I'm Jake Bruton, and today I want to talk to you about possibly the biggest mistake I've made in, 10 years. Let's do it now. So I want to start this video by saying this is and isn't about the actual mistake. It's actually about how we handle the mistake. And that's the important takeaway. That's the thing that you could actually turn a mistake into a selling point to one of your clients. So let's talk about the mistake. We're at a small home that the basement cut was done a couple weeks ago. If you watched last week's, maybe the week before, Build Show Network video about the fabric footings from the Fast Foot from Fab Forms, that's this project. And I believe you can see behind me, they're not installed anymore and they don't have concrete in them. And that video is a couple weeks old potentially. So how did we get to a point where we're actually working backwards? So I laid out the lot with actually my 15-year-old son, because he's been helping a little bit over the summer. I laid out the cut for the basement. I took our plot plan that our site surveyor provided for us, that the city had approved, and I brought it over here and I laid everything out with him. We're supposed to be 25 feet on the front setback, so then that sets the cut for the basement. That sets the footing that my feet are down in now. That sets everything. Well, I looked at the plans once I got on site, which I've spent 2 or 3 whole days going over these plans over the last 6 months, getting ready for this job to start. And I read 25 feet 3 inches, and I pulled from the curb instead of from the property line. And those two things are not the same. You know that there's a setback probably up there, and you know as well as I do that almost every time the measurement given is actually from the property line, because the property line is what matters. I've laid out dozens of houses over my career. This is the first one I've ever stuck in the wrong place. I'm assuming, now that I've made this big of a mistake, that it'll be the last one. But it's my hubris being here, teaching my son. It's my hubris that got us to a point where we dug footings in the wrong spot, where our basement cut needs to be extended deeper into the lot by a few feet. And that happens. You get into the mentality of, I know what I'm doing, I know what this is, I know how to do this, and you forget to stop and check your work. Even somebody like me who constantly preaches trust but verify, I would never lay out a house by only looking at the plot plan once. If I would have looked at it a second time, I would have changed how this was. But there was a whole bunch of stuff going on. The plot plan was given to us in feet and decimals. So then I was teaching my son how to convert from decimal to inches so that we knew what to do. And I just wasn't thinking. I got caught up in the process and not in the trust but verify mentality that I try to live by. The footings were already, the form work for the footings was in place and ready to be poured. We did not pour. We caught it before we got to that point. So it's not a huge deal. And in reality, because I wanted to better understand how this, the fabric footing material worked, it's just my time and my son. So I'm not out any money. Obviously, I'm out my time, my money sort of thing. But I didn't have concrete placed yet. I didn't have basement walls set or anything like that. So it's not the end of the world. So I want to talk about the fix real quick. The fix is all the form work came out of place. We're going to dig the basement further back. The footing that I'm sitting in will get moved back to where it's supposed to be. This will get backfilled. We'll probably have to backfill this a second time before we put the driveway in too, because we'll have a little indention here that we have to take care of and make sure that we don't have a problem with. The fix is not terribly difficult. Yeah, I'm going to pay another delivery fee for the excavator, and he'll have to come back, and our budget goes up a little bit on that because it just costs more to come back a second time than to do it right the first time. Moving forward, what does this look like? This is the real part of the video. Tip number 1 is when a mistake like this is made, the first thing you have to do is you have to get everything organized to get the ball in motion. You have to have the solution in motion. The next thing after you have that solution, you have to talk to the clients about it. The clients are going to realize that their project's delayed by a couple weeks and that the form work was here and then the form work went away. They're going to ask questions. You have to address things like this with the clients immediately. There's this feeling, or at least it is with me, there's a feeling with me where I'm like, man, I don't want to have to tell them that. I don't want to have to admit that I was wrong. I don't want to have to go to the clients and say, you hired me, and the first thing we did, I messed up. However, I have a rule, and that rule is if it's something that needs to be discussed with the clients, you do it as the earliest opportunity as possible. And that's a huge lesson for me. I find the solution, and then the next step is to talk to the clients. If I waited 3 weeks to try to tell the clients what happened here, they're already going to know something that happened, and they're probably going to ask me. And if the client has to ask you what the issue is, that means you should have already talked to them about it because they've figured it out on their own. So get your solution in place, talk to the clients. That's number one. Number two, what the contract says. Our contract doesn't have a clause for if we make a mistake. Our contract just talks about the cost plus activity in our contract. So we have an opportunity to apply our right and wrong, our morality to the contract here that's up to us. So if we're cutting base trim or installing a cabinet and we put that cabinet in the wrong spot, or we cut that piece of base trim too short and we have to recut or pull the cabinet loose and move it over a couple inches, that in my mind is regular workflow. We're not perfect. The contract doesn't ask us to be perfect. The contract asks us to use our best practice, and people make mistakes. So I'm not going to the client and talking to them about, oh, I made one cut wrong and I wasted this piece of base trim. I'll find a way to use that base trim in another room where it's shorter and work through the process. Or I'll clock out 2 minutes late if I had to move a couple cabinets that day, or early because I had to move a couple cabinets. I don't talk to them about that. And I'm not worried if our trim guy cuts one wrong. However, this mistake, this is big enough that this is on me. This is not the client's fault. This is not the job's fault. This is not the plot plan or the architect's fault. This is my fault. I have to burden the cost on this from what I would say a right and wrong standpoint, a morality standpoint. And I think the clients will respect that. The clients just pulled in next door. I probably could ask them. The paying for it is part of what we do. That's the burden risk of being the business owner. If I were subcontracting for somebody else and installing cabinets, I wouldn't charge them for the time that I had to move all the cabinets in the kitchen over 2 inches, but I would charge them for the cabinets moving over a half an inch, or one cabinet moving half an inch. So I think we have this gray area that we have to make a decision that I can't tell a client this is how it works, but I can tell a client that I'm going to try to do what I believe is right, and I'm going to try to make sure that you understand why we made the decisions we made. So the takeaways are: don't get stuck in your own hubris. Figure out what the fix is. Go to the clients immediately and check your own morality in the situation. Is this something that's your fault that's going to be costly? If it is, maybe it's on you. Can't force your contract, but I can take responsibility for this one, and I can learn from it. Now, the interesting thing, we've taken the footings, we cut them loose from the stakes, turned them up, and just moved them to the side of the lot. They still have the cross members. They still have the runner that's attached long ways to hold our Steelmate steel holders. They even still have our gator bar, our fiberglass bar in them. So hopefully we can just flip them back into place, slide them to the appropriate location where they're supposed to be, and remount them. I'm sure there'll be some fiddling and some stuff will have to come apart, but it only took us about 15 or 20 minutes to get the footings out of the way so that we can call the excavator. So let's go call the excavator. Have a good day.